Good afternoon, everyone. We will be offering simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish during this meeting. If you wish to hear the speakers in English or Spanish, please click the interpretation button at the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. You'll see a globe icon that will appear right after these instructions. If you're joining us via the Zoom smartphone app, select your language by clicking More or the three dots in the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. Select Language Interpretation, then choose English or Spanish and click Done. Then choose if you wish to hear only the interpreter and not the original speaker, be sure to click Mute Original Audio. Muy buenas tardes, estaremos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea al español. Durante esta reunión, si desea escuchar la interpretación en inglés o español, haga clic en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla Zoom. Verá un icono en forma de globo terráqueo que aparecerá después de estas instrucciones. Si nos acompaña a través de la aplicación Zoom para smartphone, seleccione su idioma haciendo clic en donde dice Más o en los tres puntos en la esquina inferior derecha de la pantalla. Seleccione su idioma y haga clic. Después elija español o inglés y después haga listo. Si desea escuchar solo al intérprete y no a los presentadores, asegúrese de hacer clic en donde dice silenciar audio original.
Right, welcome all of you and anyone who's joining us on Zoom. Thank you so much for being here to learn about supporting your first grade reader. I know I already asked a few people, but if you have other children at other ages besides first grade, can you tell me? Because I kind of want to give, I know we have a couple of TK students, parents in here too. I can give you some little tips for them as well.
My younger daughter is in
preschool. Okay, nice. All right. Okay, so we'll start off with just some introductions of who we are so that you know who we are. I'll let Mrs. Krim go first.
Megan Krim, the English teacher, first grade.
And my name is Sean Powell. I'm one of the literacy specialists here at AEA, and this year I'm supporting TK through third grade. This is my 14th year at AEA, and for the first 12 years I was a special education teacher, and then I transitioned over into this role last year. So I have a lot of ideas and things that I'm trying to do with our literacy program here. And I'm lucky to partner with amazing teachers like we have at AEA. And they're here to help me today because I know a lot about teaching reading, but I've always worked with kids who are struggling readers. So it's really important to have our teachers here too, so they can give the broad picture of what it really looks like for all first grade students. So we will be giving you an overview today of some of the things that we think are really important for you to know about teaching, helping your child become a successful reader. And we'll be asking for your questions at the end, but also feel free to ask questions at any time during. I am not sure about restrooms. Michelle laughed already. Are there any restrooms open? When Mrs. Moreno, are there any restrooms open in case people need them?
Yes, going through the library, they can use the adult women's restroom in the library, or that's just right outside the library.
So that's just straight across from where we are right now. So if you need to use the restroom, you can feel free to get up and step out.
My name is Andrea Thomason. I'm the German teacher and I'm Megan Krim's partner. So we correlate our reading practices along like any other teaching team, but I'll be presenting the German side of it when she's presenting the English one. And unless you really make a distinct differentiation between English and German, you can just assume that whatever you hear here tonight applies to both languages.
So we have a few objectives tonight that we want to accomplish with you. The first one is we want to describe to you what are the components of learning to read. Second one is we're going to talk to you about phonological awareness and phonics, which are two of the components and two of the ones that are really important for this age group. The third one is we're going to discuss developmental readiness and how that impacts your child when it comes to learning how to read. I know people are taking notes too, but this slideshow, I can send it out to you afterwards too, so you don't have to feel like you have to write everything down if it's here too, okay? And then the fourth one is we want to share strategies with you for home support. If there's things you want to support your child with, what can you do? There's a mosquito buzzing
There-
around me, so if you
Yeah.
see me,
Yeah.
if you see me,
I'm
you're
sorry.
here.
I have the buzzer on.
There's also 4 really important ideas that we hope that you, if nothing else, that you take away with you from today. The first one is read to your child. Expose them to stories, to language. It's really important to build their general knowledge of the world and the things in this world. It really helps them when they're learning to read the vocabulary and just being able to make connections to the things that they're learning about through reading and their books. The second one is, and this will make more sense later, I promise you, but if it's in the body, it's in the brain. So this is why we incorporate a lot of movement and a lot of multi-sensory strategies in our teaching and learning with our kids. Third one is do the sound work. So that basically means in first grade, we talk a lot about sound. Sound out words, we have to know the sounds. So we want our students to really be risk takers, try really hard to do this and not be scared to try it because it is hard. It's not easy. It's new for some of them. The fourth one is learn the code. So with English and Spanish and German, there's a code that you have to know. There is a sound that is associated with each letter or with each group of letters. And for any language, you have to know that code to become a reader. So we want you to understand the code. We want them to understand. And then pizza is here. If you would like to grab a piece, I'm going to keep talking, but don't feel like I'm going to be annoyed if you get something to eat. Please help yourselves to pizza. I want to tell you a little bit about just our literacy program at AEA, what that looks like. So our program is unique because we are a dual language immersion school. So what that means is we have children that are learning 50% of the time in English, 50% of the time in German. So that makes us very different from other schools that are only taught in English because our teachers have half the time to teach 100% of the state standards. So the pace is often pretty fast. Kids don't get as much practice time in our setting as they would if they were at a school with English. But there's a trade-off for that too. They're becoming biliterate. The skills that they're learning in German for reading, they cross over, they help each other. German skills help them learn English, English skills help them learn German. So there's a trade-off for that too. But what we see is a lot of the time when kids first start taking standardized tests at our school, their English scores are lower than other schools in the state and the county that are English only. The reason is because they're learning 2 languages and learning to be literate in 2 languages. What we have found over the years is by the time they leave us in 5th grade, most of our students have caught up and they're scoring average compared to other students in California. So, but just something to know, especially as they progress through, because sometimes we get families very worried about why their child isn't performing like the neighbor, right? So just remember, when they're becoming biliterate, it takes a little bit longer up front, but then it really helps them later on. We do use evidence-based reading instruction. So the curricula that we use to teach reading here is based on research that has been done to show that it's effective. So right now in grades K1 and 3, we use a curricula called SIPS, which is Systematic Instruction and Phonological Awareness, Phonics, and Sight Words. It's a research-based system that we use. Our 2nd grade team is currently using From Phonics to Reading, which is another, it's evidence-based. Now, ideally, we would all be using the same program. That's one of my projects that I have over the next few years is we need to have one program for all of our primary grades. So right now, this is where we are. And then also in grades K through 3, we have a German phonics curriculum. A, B, C, D, F, G.
Oh,
Maybe I said it. But that's also based in evidence for teaching phonics in German. So our kids are getting a lot of really high quality instruction in what the code is for both of those, the code for German and the code for English. So we're gonna play you a quick video. I'm gonna say something really quick before you guys start it. Is learning a natural process. This is something I really want everyone to understand. Humans are born with the innate ability to learn language. Our brains are wired for oral language, for listening, for speaking, and picking it up very naturally. Reading is a really new skill if you look at it in evolutionary terms. It's only about 10,000 years old. Our brains have not yet caught up. So our brains are not wired to be readers. We have to teach explicitly. Neural connections have to be made in order to do that. So this is a really short video that just talks a little bit about what's happening in the brain.
What do we know about the complex process of learning to read? Surprisingly, a lot. Scientific research collected over the past 4 decades reveals what happens in the brain and what must happen in the classroom to enable skillful reading. Most children learn to walk and talk naturally without a lot of support from adults, but reading is different. Reading is not hardwired in the brain, and the neural pathways involved must be developed through successful instructional experiences. Let's look at the reading brain. The parts of the brain that allow us to process sound and recognize visual images are already in place at birth in the left hemisphere. However, the phonological assembly region is not intact at birth. This is the part of the brain that allows us to connect speech sounds with visual images, such as letters, and enables reading. And it must be built through explicit, systematic phonics instruction and practice with decoding.
We'll be talking a lot about what that looks like, right? What it looks like here, how you guys can help support that at home if you have children that need a little extra help with it. So now we'll talk about what are the components of learning to read. When I first became a teacher, way back in my teacher training program, I had no idea. When I think back to myself learning how to read, I don't even remember how that happened. I don't remember how I was taught. I just learned to read, right? I had no idea, even back then when I knew nothing, how complicated this is, all of this is for kids to learn and for people to teach. So even now, I've been doing this for 14 years. I still feel like I have so much to learn. So the reason I'm sharing this with you guys today is so you can understand how much is involved and how hard it is sometimes for our kids to be able to grow in this area. So back in 2000, we had something called the National Reading Panel. And what they did was they reviewed all of the reading research for the past 35 years. And they drew they put together 5 keys to being a successful reader, 5 categories. So this image represents what we sometimes refer to as the 5 pillars of the early literacy. So I'm going to go through each one of them. They're kind of down at the bottom, but we'll go through one by one. So the first one is called phonemic awareness. You're going to hear that word a lot today, phonemic. It just means sounds. When we talk about phonemic awareness, we're talking about sound awareness, like the sounds that the letters make. This is the ability to be able to identify the sounds that make up speech. So this can be in any language. This isn't exclusive to English. You want to be able to hear the sounds that are in a word, break them apart, think about what's the first sound, what's the last sound, what's the middle sound. You don't even have to look at letters for that. So this one comes about from all the play around language that we have with our children when they're little, rhyming, singing songs, rhythm. All of these things are really helpful in terms of pre-reading skills. Phonics is the next area, and this is where we add in letters, where kids are looking at the actual letters. So this is the sound letter correspondence. So this is where we teach kids the code, the alphabetic code that they need to know in German and English. If they're learning Spanish as well, they need to know that code for that language. So they have to be able to match a sound with a letter or a group of letters in order to read words. Fluency. So this is the ability then to read smoothly, to read accurately, and to read at a rate that promotes comprehension. Ultimately, we want to understand what we're reading. So first grade starts looking at this at the end of first grade. They have their first fluency assessment at the end of the year, because the whole first part of the year is learning how to read. We don't want them to read quickly. We don't want them to be rushing. We want them to be accurate and have that skill. So we won't talk a lot about this tonight, but that's what that is.
Unless they're ready.
Yeah,
And
that
then
is true.
we do have kids who do come in at first grade who have already kind of broken the code a little bit. And so if they're ready for some fluency practice, we definitely do it. And we'll talk about how we do that.
The fourth pillar is vocabulary. I love the picture that says all the words.
Yeah.
This is one of the best things you can do with your child is just talk with them. Let them hear the words, understand the words. When you're out and about, if they're asking, sometimes we get tired of our kids asking us a bazillion questions, but it's actually really good language exposure for them. So just talking to them and telling stories and talking about what you see in the movies, in a book you read, whatever. This is a really important thing for all of our kids, that no matter how young they are. You can talk to kids before they even have speech yet. You can be talking to them and using a lot of rich language that stimulates. So really important thing to do. And the final one is the most important one. The ultimate goal of all the other ones is to understand what we read. We have a lot of different purposes for why we read. Sometimes we read for entertainment. Sometimes we read to learn something new. But no matter what reason it is that we're reading, we have to understand it for it to be valuable. So that's what we are working towards with all of this. So this is a visual that has been out for a few years now that shows really how complex learning to read is. And this was in your handout packet, so you should have one if you want to look at it. I know it's kind of small here. The top part with the blue twines is the language comprehension part, and that includes background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. And then the bottom part, the green strands, is word recognition, phonological awareness, decoding, that's knowing the sounds for the letters, and sight recognition of familiar words. So there's all these components, and in order to become a skilled reader, they all have to weave together, and the child has to be skilled in each one of those things in order to be that skilled reader that we're hoping for them to be. So it just shows you how complex all of this is in terms of how kids get there, and if they aren't there yet.
I love that term, skilled reading, because it really acknowledges all the different components of it.
So we're going to talk a little bit about phonological awareness. Any questions so far before we get to another topic? So phonological awareness, we already mentioned phonemic awareness, and that's a part of phonological awareness. So phonological awareness has levels and stages that kids progress through. The easiest one is rhyming and alliteration. So rhyming, we know. Alliteration is starting with the same sound at the beginning of, like if you're doing a tongue twister, Peter Piper picked a peck of peppers. That's alliteration, the same sound repeated. Then we go into sentence segmentation, which is kids being able to recognize that sentences have words and that those are distinct units. So if you said, I have a dog, they can tell you, I have a dog, that's 4 words. They can just hear it. They don't need to write it or read it, but just to be able to hear that there's distinct sections of a sentence. And then syllables, being able to hear syllables in words, being able to divide them up and hear that there are parts of the words. Then we go to onsets and rhymes, which is the first sound in a word and the rest of the word. So like the word cake, the onset is k, the rhyme is ache, cake. So being able to kind of differentiate out that first sound and the rest of it. Then the big one, and this is the one that's really important in first grade, phonemic awareness. And again, phonemic just means sounds, anything to do with sounds. So they have to be able to hear sounds and put them together to make a word. And they have to be able to hear a word and segment it or separate it out to know the individual sounds in the word. That's what we do when we're spelling. And then we'll talk a little bit more, I think, on the next slide too. So it's the ability to notice, think about, and work with individual sounds and spoken words. So just this one, you don't even have to have letters that you're looking at. You're just able to hear the sounds. Phonemic awareness is important for sounding out and blending sounds to read words. So the blending part is how we read, as well as segmenting words to spell them. And there's a little picture down here that we'll talk more about later for a strategy for spelling that we use for the kids for pounding the word and tapping the sounds. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So phonemic, there's a lot of research just now coming out that shows originally people thought that for phonemic awareness, we really need to practice the sounds with kids a lot. What's coming out now is it's actually better to combine it with phonics so that they can see the letters at the same time they're hearing the sounds and thinking about the sounds. That the research is showing that that's more effective for them to gain the skills they need in that, and also get the skills they need to be beginning readers and read words. So that's just new stuff that we're trying to now, okay, we can put that together and make sure they're getting that at the same time. So you could be doing things like this at home if you have magnet letters on your refrigerator. You know, you can say the sounds while you point at the letters, and that's a good way to practice those. Okay, phonics. So this is kind of where the rubber meets. A lot of time on phonics in first grade. It's the alphabetic principle or the code that they need to know. And again, any alphabetic language has its own code. You have to know the sounds that go with the letters. So we're teaching them that. And then phonics also teaches the relationships. So it teaches, we have these written letters, right? And we have to teach the kids that there's a sound that goes with them, both for reading and then writing and spelling. So we are doing that in English, we're doing that in German, and these skills are supporting each other, because if a child is learning that, oh, I know that letters make a sound, and I know that in English, the sound for this letter is such and such, and in German, it might be something different. So that's something this group can do sometimes get challenged with and have some confusion about. I think is it 13 sounds that are the same? I haven't counted recently. Is it 13?
The blue ones.
The blue ones, okay.
All the same.
So the blue ones up there have the same sound in English as they do in German. So those are easy for the kids because there's no switching back. But there are sounds that are different. And we'll talk about, we have motions that go along with the sounds to help them be able to kind of hook their brain on, is this, do I need the English sound? Do I need the German sound? We'll talk more about it.
And it's really important that they do that movement. So we did CH in English, and CH is ch, and in German it's, and we did it back to back weeks. Yeah. And I actually think they know it better than if we did it at different times. Yes. And so I would just say the English, and they would, because they would want to do this. I'm like the English, and they went, and they immediately made that connection because they had something to kind of hang on to, and it was that movement.
Yeah, and we can give them.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
The same thing on my door. I have the sound of the beat. They kick me in going like, and I'm like,
But it was the movement that anchored them.
Yeah, that's a great word for it, the
Yeah.
anchor. So sometimes when I'm asking kids or assessing them, what's the sound for this? And they can't remember it. I just need to give them the motion, oh, and they know right away. So it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty amazing how that little thing just triggers that, they can pull it out of their brain and by having that motion. Yeah.
I've been seeing the German sound movement charts a lot, but do we have an English sound chart?
I do think we sent one home at the beginning, but we can
This,
resend
this
it.
is what it
And
looks
this is what
like.
it looks like.
And at the end of this, the slide presentation, there's actually a link to, we have a slideshow that has a slide for each letter of the alphabet in English. And then there's a really short video, like 3 seconds of the sound and the motion that goes with each one. And this chart is also linked in there as well. But we can send one home.
We
to
can
you.
absolutely send it.
Yeah. So this is the English sound chart. English has 44 different sounds that you can make between all of the letters and letter combinations. So kids have to learn a lot, and they don't learn it all in first grade. They learn the basics in first grade, and then we move on to some of the more complex sounds as they progress through second grade. By the end of second, they they should have pretty much learned all of the basic ones. So yeah, they have to learn all of those in order to read words. And then the next slide shows us the German. Same thing, and German actually has 45 sounds. We were
Yeah, 45 sounds and 17 vowel sounds. We're just concentrating on 5, and we're not even, like in English, we do, they distinguish all the time between the short and the long vowel sounds. We're only gonna concentrate on the first 5 and the long ones because they're very clear the way we teach them. Because otherwise it's just a lot of confusion. And depending on how strong it is, it's always hard because like eventually these tests are going to be done in English and math testing and the state testing. And so we want to make sure that that English sound system is solid as they go through these foundational years, that we're going to work out the little fine details in the German once they're.
So this is what I was alluding to earlier. So we have this multi-sensory way to support kids as they learn to spell using the code that they've been learning. So we have, I have little like pictures of little hands that have, oh, do you have one again? Yeah, that's the right one.
Right.
So we use these with our kids when they're first learning. They don't need it forever, but as they're learning that they need to tap their fingers along with the sounds, we have them put their hand on top of that so they can really see what they need to do. Right-handers and left-handers have a different setup. And the reason for that is we always want to go from left to right, just like we read. Right. So we're always getting that into the body part. The movement that we're doing has to match what we're doing. So the kids, if they're right-handed, they hold their writing utensil in this hand and they're tapping with the hand they're not writing with, and that's it for left-handed students. So the left-handed students would start tapping with their thumb and go from left to right. So we tell them, we pound the word, and pound is just making a fist and pounding it, and then we open our hand and we tap the sentence. Pound the word, tap the sentence. We also do that when what we're gonna do, we have a word coming up. And then as they get into learning words with more than one syllable, then we pound each syllable and tap the sound in each syllable. So this is kind of what it would look like for spelling practice. So the teacher would say, spell the word mat. So the first thing they would do is pound it. Mat. If I'm using my wrong hand, because I'm right-handed. Mat. And then I would tap my little finger. You can go to the next one. And I would, so the student is thinking, which letter says So they have to be thinking about what's the first sound in mat. Okay, it's M, so they're gonna write it on the first sound line. This also helps with sequencing, so they keep the order correct, going from left to right of the sounds. And then for the next sound, then they think about, okay, I heard which letter says It's A. You need to write that on the second sound line. All right, and then the last sound, I'm tapping my middle finger. Which letter says T? So I'm gonna write that down, and then they can count it again and say mat. So that's a multi-sensory way that they can keep the sounds in order, because I don't know if you've seen this before, but sometimes the letters get all jumbled, and there might be an M, an A, and a T in the word, but they're not in the right order. They're kind of just all over the place. So this can be really helpful for kids that get that mixed up or often confuse the first and the last sound. It just helps them keep the order. And the sound lines are just a visual support. You have to have a letter or the letters that make that sound on each line for that word.
Today in class, we did compound words. So what we're teaching them is you can read longer words and you do the syllables. So the first word, like bathtub, for a first grader to kind of sit and go, oh, how do I write bathtub? And they always want, like, how do I spell it? And I'm not telling them anymore because bathtub, they knew we had practiced every phoneme in bathtub. So bath, bath, tub, tub. So, and then they loved it. It was a puzzle. They were empowered by stretching themselves, and this works. And I'd be happy to make some and send these home to families.
And I love that you use the word empowered because
Yeah.
that's how they feel. Like they just will be like, oh my gosh, that's a long word. I don't know how to spell a long word. And as soon as you show them, you break it into 2 smaller parts that are easy for you to spell. You know all the sounds. It's like this relief and this sense of accomplishment. And so it is really empowering for them to learn this and to know that they can do this. And there's a strategy and a method that allows them to do this.
Any questions?
Any questions about? Okay, it's on you. You want to switch places?
Sure. Actually, I'll be standing. I always
Oh.
stand. I never sit.
Okay.
So the next part is foundational competencies. And I brought in a picture again for the pillars of early literacy, because that all sounds like, okay, we can learn each of these, but before we can even go there, our body and our brain has to be able to do this. And in order to process this with both of your brain halves, you have to build that foundation. And that foundation is part of syllabic awareness, that the rhythmic unity of words and language, like what Sean was saying earlier, is that there is a human gene available for us to understand and process language. We can hear rhythm in it. We are able to repeat it, but we got to practice that. Kids who never hear anything will not have this. So the more you speak to them and clap and sing songs and hear that rhythm, that's an awareness that when, especially in German, if I then go, oh, ich gehe in die Schule, that they hear, oh, ich lasse mir bird, like they live in hearing that rhythm, even completely foreign language, there is a rhythm to it. Then their brain and their body has to be able to process how the brain and how to do that movement of reading. The eyes have to move in the direction. Our culture is right dominant, so everything goes the right way. Ideally, we want to have a right eye, a right hand, a right foot, a right ear. Your whole body is lateralized. It's dominant. It's established that I'm processing my information from the right, and I have developed directionality that I know this culture moves this way as we're processing information. Now, this is something that I'll go into a little bit deeper, but at the same time, my coordination of my body has to be established in order to do reading, because not only is my eye supposed to go this way as I'm reading, and I have to kind of already look ahead in order to process the sounds and move them along. I also have to have my eye look this way. I have to be able to speak at the same time. Maybe I have to move my hand underneath. These are all functions that my body has to do. And if my body isn't able to speak and do a movement at the same time, I will not even be able to get here. Then motor skills and articulation. So they have found that kids who can throw a ball and speak at the same time are also struggling with reading. So we want to make sure that you can speak and do a movement as well as you read and articulate and do a movement. And there's so many like motor skills involved in reading that your body has to be ready for that. And then rhythmic clapping. Like we have kids that can't keep that beat as we're talking, as we're singing songs, and it's hard for them. So the more we can do this as they're getting ready to read, the easier these 5 pillars will.
And for left-handed children, we're not
I'm
worried.
so sorry.
It's not just, we don't want just righties.
No.
In the whole.
No, sorry. So left hand, if you have a left dominant eye and a left hand, you just have to focus on our culture, on the directionality. You just eventually learn, this is the way I'm going. And so a lot of times kids that are more left driven, we mark a spot on the page, or we give them a reading journal that just points them that way. It is easy for left dominant people to learn reading as well, because they have established the dominant side of their body, and their brain just switches over to go into that direction.
But it's a right-handed culture.
It's a right-handed culture.
Yeah.
So somebody who writes with left will have a little bit more difficulty. If they're left eye, they have to learn, they have to go this way as they're reading. So it can be difficult. So, but that, not to take away from that. So right dominance has a right hand and right eye, left dominance, left eye, left hand, directionality is learned. Where it gets problematic is cross dominance. That means that when you have maybe a right hand, but your left eye is the dominant one, you might have a dominant left foot, you might use both hands for writing. It hasn't really, the dominance hasn't been established well enough to support the reading process. So when we see kids that have that, we want to zone in and make sure that we're not missing anything to help them gain the capabilities that they need in order to learn how. We have a few tests that we do in first grade, and one of them is to look at this picture, and I ask him, what do you see? And if you're a right-handed, right-footed, prefer right ear, right eye kind of person, you will say, I see a duck. So solid dominance established and all functions dominantly controlled by the left brain half. The kids that see the bunny in this picture are often left-handed. The leading eye does not correspond with the dominant hand. We call it cross-dominant, and they often switch D and B and G and P and E and 3. And they confuse them because they're not lateralized yet. So there are things that we can do in order to help them, but that shows us that their foundation for reading is not quite there yet. And sometimes it's kind of like you want to teach them, but their body is just not ready to do that.
And that's the thing about developmental readiness. There's nothing that any of us can do to speed that up. Kids are ready when they're ready. So it's really important for us to know if a child is ready or not, because we don't want to intensify intervention for them if they're just not ready for it. We want to support them along and keep watching and see when they master these skills, support them with some motor skill practice that can help them get some practice with that. And then when they're ready, we can really give them what they need in terms of the reading intervention. So it's just another piece that we think about when we're helping to support kids and kind of seeing where they're at and what we should be doing for them.
I have a question about the D and the B.
Yes.
Luke confuses those all the time. Is there anything that I can do to help him? I know he's right-handed, but he doesn't.
And there's a certain normality still in first grade because it's just something that is still so new. I would just ask him, look at the letter. Is there something wrong with it, or does it look weird? Is it facing in the right direction? Eventually, we're just putting a dot underneath, and they know, oh, did I write it backwards? Yes.
I'm going to show you what I've been teaching. It's for a small group, so this isn't all first graders, but the ones that I work with. I'm going to turn my back because you have to be able to see my hands like this. So we tell them to put their hands, their thumbs up, put them together like this to make a bed. So it kind of looks like a headboard and a footboard. So if you say bed, you hear the B sound first and the D sound last. So then you talk to them about, okay, there's a straight line here and the belly is here on the B. On the D, there's a straight line here and the belly here. So then they can compare it to what's on their paper, what's in their book, and it can help them. And we also do make your bed pretty quickly. Now you've got a P and a Q. Make your bed pretty quickly. So a lot of them will use that.
And as they're reading, they could just go like this, and writing as well.
And pretty soon they won't need it anymore. You know, it's just like, it's a
Yep.
tool to use when you need it until you don't need it anymore. Just like those spelling, the sound lines, they won't need those tools forever, right? It's just to teach them the skill.
So if it's in the body, it's in the brain. And this is just an example of a crossover. We want the body parts to cross over. Just to show just. This is in the video, I mean, in the slideshow.
And for those of you who have younger siblings in TK, she uses a lot of Jack Hartman videos for all kinds of things. But there's just, if like I said, you can't hurry the developmental readiness, but you can help them practice skills where they are crossing over that midline. Because the more practice they get, the easier it gets, and it builds those pathways in the brain. Sometimes what we see is for kids that don't have that ability yet, they will write up until their midline. And then, I mean, we even have some kids are so severe that they switch hands and finish, but they won't ever cross their midline. Like it just isn't their body. Their brain's not wired that way yet. So when you play games like that and try different things, like we have some stepping stones outside. I don't even know if I can do it, but they have to step across and cross their body, and it's fun. Like it's a game, but it really helps them get that skill going that they need to have that's important for reading.
Other things are standing on one leg, rope jumping, crawling, anything that gets them moving so that they can.
Like the hand games, you know.
Clapping games.
Oh yeah,
You know,
those are
when
great.
you're a kid, you know.
So synchronized language and movement, these are just some ideas to support with that same kind of movement that Jack Hartman was just doing. Synchronized speaking, clapping, and walking as I am going. I'm segmenting my language. Speaking while throwing a ball, articulation and movement at the same time is important. Walking to a beat, reading, rhyme, singing, song, catching the ball, rope jumping, standing on one leg. I think juggling, singing a song, even if you don't want balls, use fabric. And then really important, I would insist, after doing even more research, I would insist now every time to use a finger on the words, just because it not only helps with the directionality, you're moving the right way. It is a movement. It can be a syllable movement, especially for German. It supports that whole movement processing capability. So super, super important. And any activity that supports a movement to the right, because we are this right-oriented culture.
Okay, so any questions about that? You're going to kind of see why we went at length to this development of readiness, because you know, you could say, please, come on, why are you doing it? And if their body hasn't had that practice, that gross motor skill practice, we could want it as much as we want it. If their body's not ready for it, it's not going to happen. You want to save that frustration. You want to always try to find the joy for trying to teach kids. So this is our process of the teacher in first grade. We have these windows of assessment. What do they know? And we call it a beginning of the year assessment window. So right when they come in, we have data from kindergarten, but we know over kindergarten, over the summer, a lot can happen. They can continue to build on the skills they have, or sometimes their skills fall off because of summer slide. So we look at some data. We do these little snapshots of phonics skills. We do snapshots of phonemic awareness. Can they hear the sounds? Can they put sounds together orally? Can they take them apart? We do a little spelling inventory. We do sight words. How many sight words do they know? And then we look at data kind of drives where we start. And so this year, with your cohort, for phonemic awareness, so that would be the blending of sounds and taking apart sounds. At the very beginning of the year, we had 34% of this cohort only proficient in it. So we're looking at that, we're kind of going, this is kind of, we consider a foundational skill.
Well, and I'll add a little
before-
perspective too.
yeah.
So developmentally, these two skills should be mastered by the time kids are 6. So by the time they're coming into first grade, they should be able to do this. So this was kind of interesting and a little alarming to us.
It was, and it makes us wonder, so right? So then you have this segmenting that helps with our spelling. And so it's just information for us. We're wondering, it's the very beginning of the year, it's first grade. They don't even know what an assessment is. So a lot of kids, like I did the sight word assessment, and then I knew 3 words. I'm like, okay, I know 3 words. And then I did it a month later, and then knew 20 words. And I'm like, well, I didn't know what you were doing. So when I take snapshot, it is a snapshot. So then, this is kind of what we want. We want first graders to really kind of be ready for the phonics, right? Those sounds. So the consonant sounds. So we're continuing to look, and we're going, okay, 47% of our cohort is proficient, have them. Not all the time necessarily, but they do have them.
And that window of assessment.
And
they
that
had.
window of assessment, again, what were you doing with me, lady, over there? And then short vowel sounds, so we're getting a little more complex. Short vowel in English would be a, I, a. And then that's where we always start with short vowels. And then the ability to put those sounds together and that to read a word. So like hat, mop. And you'll see that it's interesting that they're a little bit more proficient with this. So that's interesting. You would think that, okay, but now they're putting some sounds together and they're reading some words. And so, so then we kind of know where to start with everybody. Of course, somebody who has this, we know where to start. We know where to start. We're going to take kids where they are, and we're going to continue to grow. We do whole group learning. We call it tier 1 teaching, where those phonics passages that come home, and there's like a skill that we're working on. That's great for all of us. So if you're just really working on that phoneme, that TH, which in our school, that TH is so important because in Spanish, they don't have it. They really have to zoom in. They want to go like the F sound, and it's. So we really hone in on those skills, and some kids can just really read the phonics skill. Some kids could read the phonics skill and some sight words. The kids who can read it, then we want those kids to work down in writing. So that is so layered and developed for where kids are ready to enter. So this is actually a little high for us. We want to see more green. We're not alarmed. We're going to adapt our teaching for this. But then,
Can I interject
Yeah.
one more thing before we go to the
Of
next
course.
one? This is the first year that we have collected all of the data for the entire first grade level and analyzed it. Usually teachers analyze their own data between the teaching teams, but this year we collected it all. So this information was actually really helpful for us at the beginning of the year because I emailed all the first grade team and I said, hey, we have a big need in phonemic awareness. Like the kids are not proficient in this, so we need to be focusing on that beginning of the year for everyone. So sometimes that might have been something we were just doing in our reading groups, in our small reading groups for certain kids. But we realized that this was a need across the entire grade level. So right away, teachers started working on this. So that I thought that was really helpful. It's the first time we've done that. So
And it actually didn't take long. So, you know, we, like I said, we have a beginning of the year, we have a middle of the year, and we're already seeing this tremendous progress. We were a little like, okay, let's go, we're ready. But we're already seeing, because of this data, and there's some other data we're going to show that has really a lot to do with what Andrea was talking about, that we just had to build that foundation, and we are building it, and now our kids are really taking off. So we're super excited about the middle of the year data.
And our data for the German side looked very similar. It was also the whole analysis of like all the our groups in the first grade in German, and we found the same needs. But since German is also trailing on English, like the success that happens on the English side when it clicks for your native language, then you can apply that knowledge for the English. So we're starting to see that same uptrending on the German side,
which is super exciting because then we're just how strong their brains are. So, but this is the developmental readiness that we kind of went, oh, wait a minute here. This is interesting to us. So Andrea Tollefson has been taking data on that bunny test, the bunny and the rabbit. And that tells us if their brain has lateral. And so this is just our two classes and 24 kids in each class, so 48 kids. And in 2020, you know that famous year, right? 17 kids out of those two cohorts indicated that they're not lateralized yet. Their brain is not crossing over. And then 2021, there's 21 kids. In 2022, 18. And then look at this jump for this cohort. So 30 kids, 30 out of 48 were indicating not a strong lateralization. And think about it. During this, you know, this famous year, we were on iPads, we were in computers, we weren't going to parks, we were limiting going outside, we were limiting the peer contact, we were limiting these things because we had to, right? It was our message that we got. And so we wonder, we're not researchers, but this makes us want to be full on researchers because this, I mean, 67% for this cohort. And so we look at this and we're like, okay, let's do it. Let's do these lateralizations. Let's make sure we're doing the brain gymnastics. Let's make sure when we're doing sounding out, we are matching our mouth to our body. I'm like, so, mat. Let's cross these bodies. Let's talk to our PE teacher. And because of that, we are seeing foundation, right? Now we're seeing growth because they were ready. But if we didn't notice this, we'd be still kind of like, what's going on here? What's going on? So I hope this kind of makes you go, wow, that kind of makes sense. What we were doing. So when we like to think about COVID and what happened to us, and it was several years ago, we're still feeling it. We're still feeling it as adults. And I see your nod. And our kids, but the beauty is they're so malleable, their brains are ready, and we know this foundation, and we're doing it. We're seeing this. And then this is just, this is the bunny duck. This is a little bit more consistent. And you want to go to the next one?
Yeah.
So I love this. What does it all mean when we look at the data? So this is what we do as teachers. We identify trends, phonemic awareness, all I've done is about 4 or 5 weeks, of just fun, quick drills. And we got it. We're moving. This all guides instruction. We do have some real readers in here right now, families with real readers, but every single thing we're doing helps with spelling. Right? Because they're very resistant to spell too. And I think a little bit is that, again, that, 4-year-olds, we were on computers, we were doing tablets, you guys had to work. You had to, hey, okay, we gotta get this done. I'm busy. So, so that helps us guide what we're doing whole class, but it also helps us target interventions. We're gonna be noticing who's getting it, who just needs a little extra practice. Who needs a little bit looking closer at. We look for root causes. I think they needed to move. So I think that was a root cause for this cohort.
We've
And
also
then-
done a lot of talking too about the confusion in the vowel sounds between English and German, and how it's really hard for our kinder students to come into first grade with a solid foundation in either code, because they're trying to learn both at the same time. So we're trying something different this year in kindergarten. Just trying it to see. Kindergarten kids are only learning the vowel sounds in English in kindergarten. And next year, first grade will introduce the German vowel sounds. We're hoping that if we can get a solid foundation in kinder before they come into first. This is why we try things out, we see if it works, and if it does, fantastic. If it doesn't, we'll try something different.
And every year's different. Every year's different.
And not to be concerned, because like
Yeah.
if your student is not, or you have a student in kinder right now and you're
Mhm.
hearing like, oh, they're not learning it. We have had students join us from different schools in first grade. And we've realized with that knowledge that they came in on English, it was like they had, as Sean said, the foundation, and they just plopped the other code on top, and they weren't still working on the reading process to put two sounds together, and they got confused. Which one is it? So it's like, I know if I see two sounds, I'm blending them. And when these kids come in from other schools and they're sitting at my table and I say, it's not it's and they're like, oh, ma. And it came easy to them. And so we had a lot of success stories that made us think, well, maybe we need to do that and then move to the actual German students. In the phonetic way, German kindergarten is still working on the awareness of the sound, just not the sound letter connection.
It's complex. Okay, so I'm going to speak to this a little bit. So you may have heard, and we know that when students are showing us that they're having a hard time learning to read, early intervention is really important. The research on the left here, it says 90% of children with reading difficulties will achieve grade level in reading if they receive help in first grade. That's huge. 75% of children whose help is delayed to age 9, so about third grade or later, continue to struggle for the rest of their school. So it's really important to us that we take this data, that we notice what's happening, that we can get kids help when they need it early on, because we do not want kids who are having to struggle throughout their whole school career. This other research says it takes 4 times as long to intervene in 4th grade as it does in late kindergarten because of brain development and because of the increase in content that students have to learn as they get older. So early intervention is really important. And so that's something that we're really working hard on at AEA, is to make sure that we are providing that for our kinder students and our first grade students, so that we can not have to spend 4 times as long 2 years from now, Thank you. So what does intervention look like at AEA? So basically our intervention centers around small groups. So we have small groups that are happening in the classroom with their English teachers and their German teachers. So when they do reading groups, they are providing specific instruction to each group, and the groups are built together by their need. Where are they at? What phonics do they need to learn? So they're all getting the same instruction in the group.
We also do that with myself and some of the people that help me up in the Learning Center. So sometimes I'll pull out groups for a little while every day or a few days a week and work with them as well. We just started some before school reading groups. This is the first time that we're doing this. And the same thing, they're just getting more instruction at where they're at. So these are all kids that we've assessed and we've determined that they still aren't quite where we want them to be yet. We want to get them there sooner rather than later. So we're trying to give them opportunities to get this extra help. And then what we're doing in these groups is explicit instruction based on our data, and then we progress monitor them. That just means that we take additional data pretty frequently. Like if we're working with them on 5 different phonic sounds in this group, every week we're going to test them on those sounds. Do they have them? Do they have them? Okay, they do. Move on. What's next? Keep plugging them along. So we're really trying to base it in data and keep it very specific for what they need. Any questions?
Any
about
questions about that?
interventions or who we're talking?
Well,
I can't remember. So how can you support your child at home? This is the #1 question that we get every time we meet with families in SST meetings. I'm sure you guys get it all the time. So this is not an exhaustive source of how you can help, but some of the ways that we think are easy and fun that you could be doing at home. So this is, like we said, we go back to our big ideas. This was our first big idea, was read to your children. Research says that reading aloud to children is the single most effective parent practice for enhancing language and literacy development. So that's huge. Even if you don't have a reader in your house who can read to your child, you can listen to an audiobook with them and follow along with the text. So if you have, a younger child or an older child, a younger child, and maybe the older one's not reading yet either, they can read along to see the words as they're hearing them. It's another way that they can access that. But just spending the time to read to your child. Sometimes people say, oh, that's it. That's the biggest thing that you can do.
In your home language too.
Oh yeah, in any language.
In any language.
In any language.
How important would you say it is to sit with them so they see the book? Like both my kids are little wigglers and they sit and look at the book while we're reading it to them. Like Vivian will just draw pictures of what she's imagining while she's listening to the book, which I think is a fun
Yeah, I don't think
way,
it's
but-
important at
Okay.
all unless you are specifically trying to practice a specific
Okay.
skill with them. Then maybe you would, but this is just reading to them for enjoyment.
Okay.
So they don't need to be looking at it. That's just an option if you wanted to do an audiobook. But yeah, just reading to them. They don't have to see the book. They can just be listening. You can talk about what you read, ask questions about it, draw pictures of what they're hearing. That's huge.
That actually really shows comprehension.
Yeah, exactly. And another one is, like we said earlier, just talk with your kids. You can increase their vocabulary and their background knowledge, which are both so important for reading, by having conversations with them and just giving them a rich language environment in any language. It doesn't matter which language, your home language, in English, whatever you want to do, but just building their knowledge of the world, of different things. Because the more background knowledge they have, they can connect new knowledge to that. It really helps them learn, grow, become language users and readers and writers.
And I'm gonna stick, since some families do not have any German at home, for us to get to that point of vocabulary, it is true old-fashioned vocabulary learning for German. This week, die Gänse, der Gies, die Gänse. Like saying it, singing it, like whatever you can do with those words, they're the foundation later on for them to read for comprehension. I have some kids at the end of the school year that read a text in accent-free German fluently, but they have no clue what they're reading. So we're missing the point. Like, that's great. You have all the skills, but the words that are attached to that are foreign. So it's just sounds, but no meaning. So we want to make sure that they do get that.
And we see that with readers too, when they're sounding out a word And if it's a word they've never heard before, it's really hard for them to put the sounds together and then hear, am I reading it right? They've never heard it before, if it's not part of their oral language, right? So that's why this exposure to oral language and as much as possible is helpful for kids who are learning how to read, because then they can recognize a word because they've heard it. Right?
And that's why it's so important to learn these sounds, because if they don't have the sounds and they have a word that is as simple as mouse, and they read z, they would never hear mouse. But if they read ow, oh, mouse. So they have to have that sound in order to have that comprehension. They will not recognize the words that they should know, because they're around them all day long if they're not able to decode them.
So I'm going to move a little quickly through some of these because we're getting short on time, and I want to leave time if you have questions or specific things you want to ask about your own child. Phonological awareness. So fun things you can do with your kids is like alliteration, poems, books that have alliteration. There's songs. There's all kinds. If you search alliteration on YouTube, there will be a billion different things that you could listen to and watch with your kids. Syllable clapping. So this is one where you're asking them to hear the syllables in the word and clap the syllables. So for example, if you would say, let's play a word game. Thinking of the word apple. We're going to clap the number of syllables in the word apple. So we would say app, 2 syllables. Kids, I get a lot of buy-in on this practice with their names. We go around the table, we do everybody's names, except I'm always counting instead of clapping because I teach them pound the syllables. But so and you can do anything. Like it's fun sometimes once they get the hang of this to do something really long, and then their mind is blown by how many syllables. Like sometimes we do supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and they're always like, oh, but it's just, you can just have fun with it. Like any way that you can make this engagement with language fun is a way that they get the practice, but it's like a game. They don't feel like they're learning something. So this is a fun one for kids that are still working on trying to match the letter with the sound. If you have a little tray, you can put sand in it, or shaving cream, or rice, or dry beans, anything where they can draw in it. And you can say the sound is t, and they have to draw the letter that makes the sound in the whatever it is. Like you can just put shaving cream like on your table and they can do it. Super fun. They love it and kind of cleans your table. But the thing that you want them to do when they're doing that is have them repeat while they're writing it at the same time, which is, I was listening to you do this. I'm like, oh, some kids have a hard time doing it at the same time. But if the sound was t, they would say T says t. So they're saying the name and the sound mocked down, and they have to put all the sounds together. I was working with a student today that just cannot do this. So we tried doing the first 2 sounds. So we said ah, that. And then we said that, van, and then they were able to get it. So we just had to chunk. They couldn't keep the 3 chunks in their mind, but they could keep 2. So if your child is having trouble with blending, in the last 2 years in first grade, a lot of kids have had trouble with blending. So that's something you can try too. Oh, sorry. Well,
So we just make sure in the classroom that we don't take shortcuts. There was just not too long ago, it was really encouraged to use the picture to help you solve words, right? They're so smart, but they want to sound it out, but they want to look at you to see if you're giving them any clues. And I'm like, laser eye, laser finger, do the sound work. And, they're going to do it. And I'm seeing, and it's awesome.
And that's when you guys are reading with your kids.
Yeah.
To encourage them, tell them,
Yeah.
you know the sound, you know the code, you know how to do this. You can do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because unless you know that your child doesn't know all the sounds yet, and then you might need to help them. But if they do, they can do it. The blending part might be harder. You might have to help them chunk it until they get that skill in their brain.
That's why that syllable work is so handy, because it chunks it. for them. And if they can chunk it, then it's manageable. German?
Syllables. This ABC der Tiere is based on the theory that syllables are guiding our speaking,
Yeah.
our learning how to read, our learning how to write. It implies that if they're even, like, they take it as far as you write in syllables in blue and red. So mama, you would write the first syllable in blue and you count it mama, and syllables are important for German words because they're endless, and that's how we attack them. If I didn't know that syllable is most of the time with just two sounds, and that's why you see in the ABC der Tiere the syllable carpets, because most of the time you can take a German word apart by just these two letter segments. And if you are able to read all these syllables fluently, you can read the German words accurately. And so I want them to start looking at words in these two letter chunks. Tomate. If somebody wasn't got that. Next one, first sound. Second sound. Ah. Put it on your arm. Ah. Ma. Okay, next one. Te. Now put it together. Tomate. Now go a little faster. Tomate. Tomate. That's how we practice. And it takes a long time and it takes a lot of patience. But sometimes with some of my readers, I'm now putting these syllables together. We do nonsense words. It doesn't have to be a real word. We want them fluent in doing these fun words, like mommy is a word, great. Mati is not, but they get the feeling of it, and that's how they can attack. Now, if they weren't aware of that syllable, they would maybe read it tom ate and wouldn't know tom ate. That's not a word. It doesn't sound like a word. If they come from English, they would say, hey, Tom ate, and then we're totally off. So it's really like syllable work that we want them to be aware of. And if all you do all year long is practice these sounds in German and have them read these syllables, great. Because that's all we want them to do at the end, is put syllables together. And it makes them sound like a natural reader.
So we probably should just keep going, look for questions at this
We
point.
have a link at the end of our slideshow that has questions you can ask your children when they're reading. We're running out of time, so we'll skip that slide. We looked at this at the beginning, our 4 important takeaways. We want you to read to your child, build knowledge, that's a big one. Number 2, if it's in the body, it's in the brain. We showed you some of our multisensory tools and tricks that we use with them. Number 3, do the sound work. Encourage them to use their knowledge of the code to sound out words and spell words, and learn the code is the 4th one, right? So if they haven't learned the code yet, keep working with them on learning the code. That unlocks reading for them. They have to know that code. All right, ways to advocate for your child. If you're worried about your child, if you have any other concerns. So sometimes when you come to school and you're talking to us, to educators, we tend to use a lot of educational jargon and acronyms. Please call us on it. Any of us. Say, I don't know what that is. What does that mean? What word is that? What acronym is that? Don't let us get away with it. We shouldn't be talking like that. But ask. Please always ask. If someone says something, they start running off a bunch of, educational jargon to you, say, wait, I don't know what that is. Can you explain it to me? Because that way it's important for you to understand what's happening with your child's education. If you have concerns, first thing I would do is talk to your teacher. Talk to your child's classroom teacher first. I'm always available. My email's in here a few times at the end of this presentation. You can also reach out to me if you have concerns. I'm happy to talk with you. And you can also request a student study team or an SST team meeting. That's usually something you would discuss with your child's teacher, and they would schedule that for you. But those are all ways that you can access help to get some feedback on your child's, if you have a concern for anything with your child. This is actually just reading in general at our school.
And your teacher would have already had conversations with you,
Mhm.
starting conversations if we were really worried. So you should all be smiling. So,
So I just had one question on Zoom.
Yeah.
It was regarding if there's still extra support on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:50 in the morning. Oh, that's you.
yes, they could tell them to email us, but we do. So we looked at that data, Bautolis and I. The school was talking about how they can provide some support. The school really came through huge. Oh my goodness, it's so incredible. We have kids going at 7:15, 7:45, but Bautolis and I, we were not patient. So we invited some people to come at 7:50 when our door was open, Tuesday, Thursday, for a little extra support. So if they're not going to that 7:15 support on Tuesday, Thursday, we do have kids still coming and getting just a little practice with the phonemes. So yes, unless they're doing that earlier one. Yeah.
Any
Any questions?
I know we threw a lot of information at you
Right.
tonight.
Yeah.
What was the name of the book? The Public Space Here?
Yeah, Abitigativa, and we're about ready to start, we're already reading in this book, but, I'm gonna start sending out links where the syllable carpets, are available so that you can do that at home too, and start reading. So that we have it visualized, and so we can send the link out. I just didn't wanna do it too early, because then you go to page 100 something.
Righties, all righties, right? Righty, take this home, and these are awesome. They work. Right. We were doing it today, and they were completely empowered. So I'm excited.
Well, that's all we have for you tonight. You're welcome to take off unless there's any other questions you would like answered. All of us are always here. If you think of things later, please reach out. Happy to talk about everything. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah,
tonight.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our TKers. You got it. Don't throw this.
Forget about pizza.